right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe you do. I don't know. I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to judge.
MBA Unplugged does not condone any of
This
that.
is not a relationship advice. I saw you come in that Bentley, so I saw bags of money.
Rich Paul loaned that to me.
Shout out Rich
Shout
Paul.
out to Rich Paul.
Shout out
There
Rich
you go.
Paul. Welcome everyone to the greatest financial literacy podcast on the planet, MBA Unplugged, where today Professor Young and I have the honor to interview a very special guest. Now, many of you have heard real estate and investing are amongst some of the only ways to grow your wealth. Well, we are privileged today to have Ms. Carter, who is here to inform us on an underutilized way to grow wealth, which is through franchising. Ms. Carter, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
I'm good. I'm wonderful. Professor Young, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So we have a very exciting episode. So, Ms. Carter, I know you mentioned you have over a decade of experience when it comes to working within the franchise industry. So for the viewers, can you mind giving us a little background information about where you started and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so I started selling franchises, 15 plus years ago. And I came from the hotel and hospitality industry, so it was a pretty easy transition, one that I didn't even know existed. And that, that's part of my story. Like, I didn't know anything about franchising until I started working in this space. Yeah. And I know that's true for a lot of people that look like us, right? And so, so what I did is I spent 5 years working for Focus Brands, selling selling franchises for Cinnabon and Carvel ice cream, and then moved over to Dunkin' Brands. And so in 2017, I started my first franchise consulting business. And then January of this year, I started the Franchise Player, which is a movement that I created to provide education, opportunity, and resources to the Black community.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I know you said you really experienced the life of an entrepreneur. So the hard times that come with that, do you want to give? I know we have a lot of people, especially people in college, who want to become entrepreneurs, and I know you are a living testimony to that. What does that life consist of, and how it's not as easy as maybe social media will portray it to be?
The glitz and glamour.
Right.
That you see on TikTok. All the money, everybody
cars,
doing this and all that kind of stuff. The Bentley, so.
Yeah, no, I don't have a Bentley.
You drove in a Bentley, that's how you did.
Yeah,
I did.
It's a B, but it's not a Bentley. But, social media makes everything look great, right? Everyone's skinny and everyone's beautiful. There's filters, and there's just so much out there that's a lot of smoke and mirrors. But for me, entrepreneurship has really been, it's been rewarding, but it's also been challenging as well. So I would say, every day is going to be different, and you don't have the luxury of getting a paycheck every week, right? Yeah. You sometimes don't have health benefits, and you sometimes, you'll have good months and you'll have bad months, right? You might make a lot, in January, you might not make anything else until May, right? So you have to be very good at budgeting your money. And then you also have to understand that everybody's progress is different, right? Everybody's not on the same page. Everyone's not moving at the same pace. So competition and just comparison, I should say, is a great way to set yourself up for failure, because you have to know what your mission is, and then and do the things that help you achieve your goals versus looking at what someone else is doing.
Right, everybody else runs their own race. Everybody has their own race.
You said something that's interesting, being an entrepreneur, not getting paid, and I know that space very well. But how do you deal with the times that I always say being an entrepreneur is a lonely experience.
Very lonely.
The highs are the highs, and the lows are the really lows. And when the lows are there, you're like by yourself. How do you deal with that? And what would you recommend for future entrepreneurs that want to do something like you're doing, or it doesn't really matter? How would you recommend for them to deal with that?
It gets very lonely because most times you're surrounded by people who are working a 9 to 5, so they don't understand your world.
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
So when they're at work, they're at their 9 to 5. You might be taking a nap, right? And so your hours might be very different from them. So your friendships start to change, right? Because now you're not as available as you once were when you were working a 9 to 5 and you were on the same schedule as them. You might get invited to go to things and you can't go because maybe your money's not right, that particular month. Yeah. And so now you're missing out on social activities. Yeah. So I think you really have to understand it's lonely, and this is just if this is the walk you want to take, you have to know this versus getting into it and realizing later on in life, like I did. I wasn't always an entrepreneur. I worked a 9 to 5. I was a single mom, and so I had a mouth to feed. I had a son to raise. And so I had to work a lot of jobs that I didn't want to work until I could do what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so that's where I am now. And I'm learning even today that, being an entrepreneur and what I do in this space, not a lot of people understand what franchising is. And so my family, my friends, they're like, "Ooh, you go, girl. She's out there doing something. She's at Morehouse today." They don't know what I do, right? So it's lonely when you don't have anybody that you can talk to and share your wins with.
Right.
So if you know that, what you need to do is really surround yourself with like-minded folks who are in that same space, who understand. They might not be in the same industry as you, but they understand that struggle.
But you know that one of the things that when you were in my office this morning, we talked about you. I was telling you how I got in terms of being a professor, and I think I drew a point where, trying to find your purpose.
Yes.
How much is your purpose driving you? Yeah, I mean, that's what
it comes into it today.
Because your purpose is what gets you up in the morning.
Yeah.
Your purpose has you volunteering, as I told you, right? Because it's what God has put you on this earth to do.
So we're about to have church.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
You didn't know I did that? I told you.
Oh my gosh. So this is exactly where I am. I'm in this space, and again, didn't know what franchising was, and I've had the privilege of being in rooms where most people won't go. I've had the privilege of receiving information and education that most people don't even know exists out there. So for me to be in these places and spaces and learning what I've learned, I know beyond the shadow of a doubt that this is my calling, that God put me in those rooms because this information needs to reach our people.
That's right.
And it doesn't, right? And I'm not gonna sit here and say it's by design. I don't know all of that.
Yeah.
All I know is I've been given this information and I have to do something with it. And so that's why I do what I do, because I know that franchising is one of America's best kept secrets.
That's right.
And we are late to the dance. So it's okay. We're here now, right? There's someone like myself who can provide information based on my experiences and my exposure, but there's so many of other people who also look like us that work in this space, whom I respect greatly, and they're doing the same things in their own way, right? In different facets of franchising. It may be in the financial realm, it may be from an architectural standpoint, real estate, design, operations, right? So when we had our conference last month, we had panel discussions, and everyone on the panel looked like us. You know, they worked in these spaces in different disciplines throughout franchising. So we had one panel that was committed to like a day in the life of a franchisee. So we had Mike Quinn. He owns 102 Pizza Huts and Moe's Southwest Grills.
Oh wow!
So that's part of the Young Brands umbrella. And then we had Damon Dunn, who I sold him 5 Dunkin' Donuts stores in a small territory before I left Dunkin', and he's now up to 40 stores. So Damon is like he's like the prototype. He's retired NFL player, Stanford grad, and he came into the system, and he's super cool. Probably one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. And he knows the numbers, like he crunched the numbers, it all made sense. But I said, Damon, you don't understand the operation side of the business. And so because he's a football player, there was some pushback, and then eventually he said, okay, I'm gonna do it. So he went and he spent, I think it was like 2 weeks from open to close in the stores down in Mobile, Alabama. And came back and was like, wow, like I'm grateful that you pushed me to learn more about what I need to know, because he presented me a business plan which was solid, but it was missing the people piece, right? Because the people piece is so important. And so he basically, every time he was at the conference, he actually was my keynote speaker. And he told the story of how, I kind of pushed back, and eventually he got it. And he said, if it wasn't for Taj, he says this all the time, if it wasn't for you, I kind of would have, in not so many words, fallen flat on my face, because that business plan, even though it was great, I knew that it wouldn't get approved because I know what the brands are looking for.
That's good.
So I know we kind of got into franchising a little bit. So to bring it full circle, for people who don't know what franchising is, can you give us a little brief description of what franchising is and what it really does?
Yeah, it's really simple. So it's a legal relationship between the owner of a business model
Okay.
and an individual or a group of individuals that want to operate that business
Okay.
model. So have access to the trademarks and the brand standards and basically the business model.
Okay.
And so they pay a franchise fee to enter into that system, and then they pay ongoing fees, which are called royalties and advertising fees.
Okay.
And so there's a process to getting into a brand. Every brand's looking for something different.
Right.
There are different requirements that people have to meet. So there's financial requirements. So they want to know what is your what are your numbers, right? So what is your liquid cash?
Mm.
What is your net worth? What is your credit score,
Yeah.
right? They need to know all of these things because they have to have metrics in place because they need to know that you have access. You can get access to capital
That's right. Yeah.
to build out the stores
Yeah.
that you're committing to build out.
Yeah.
So, so I believe it's one of America's best kept secrets. I think I mentioned that earlier, and I believe that it's truly one of the best ways to get into business for yourself efficiently. Right? So you have all these systems behind you that have been proven, right? So any brand that is worth its weight in anything, right, has been battle tested. There are success stories out there. You can talk to existing franchisees, former franchisees, and really get a good understanding of what their experience has been, right? So that's a good way to kind of like measure whether or not you want to invest in a brand. But keep in mind, franchisees come into the fold in different stages, right? So someone that opened their store 20 years ago was dealing with a different set of management, right? And
Yes,
so
that's
things
right.
change,
Things
right?
change.
Trade areas move, all sorts of things happen. And so it's important that you talk to franchisees that are at different stages. So you might talk to somebody from 20 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, someone who just went through the process, someone that owns a traditional location versus a non-traditional location. So there's a lot that again, I've learned all this because I've been in this space for so long. So it's kind of common knowledge to me, but it's not common knowledge to someone that's new to franchising. And so that's what we do at the Franchise Player is we help you really navigate that process and getting you to learn what franchising is and what it isn't. And it's not for everybody, right? There's some people who are just true entrepreneurs and they want to do what they want to do, when they want to do it, and how they want to do it, right? And franchising is not for them because franchising is built on systems and processes. And if you are not coachable, then franchising is not for you. And that's an easy no, right? There's a conversation that takes place and there's certain questions that get asked, and if the answer is I want to do it my way and I don't want Dunkin' Donuts, I want Tarji's Donuts and I want to put bacon sprinkles on whatever, like
you can't
do that, right? You're buying into a system and you're paying to be a part of the system because it works. Right?
And
so
it's proven too for so long.
It's proven.
But there's something else you said, and you're going into business from a franchise standpoint, because my days at Cinnabon as a controller, I always thought that you were going into business as a proven business model, but you weren't alone.
Exactly.
As an entrepreneur, so it kind of addresses when things get lonely. As a franchisee, you might get lonely, but you got that support system. You pick up the phone, it's like, I need help. I'm having issues with this or X or whatever the case is, and you can get it addressed. You have a family to come.
You have
rescue.
a family that supports you. You have an operations team that you can lean on, but you also have peers, right? You also have you have peers in the system that you can go to and ask questions. And it might be something simple when you're just getting started that you don't need to call corporate for, right? So you have your peers that you can approach and have conversations with. But then also you have to remember that yes, the brand is responsible for a certain amount of support, right? But they can't do everything. It's really your business. You have to, at the end of the day, you have to make sure that business is successful. So they're responsible to provide what's included in their franchise disclosure document, and we'll get into that, I'm sure, at some point. But beyond that, if they've reached their legal, if they've reached the legal commitment, right? They've made true on their end of the bargain. As a franchisee, an independent business owner, you have to make sure that you are locally marketing your business, right?
You're still playing a part in the business,
You have to. You are the business,
You are the business,
right? So you've bought into the business. So some people think, okay, I paid my franchise fee and I pay these royalties, and it's the brand's responsibility to make me successful. that's not how it works, right? So you buy the rights to develop a store or whatever it is. We'll just use restaurants as an example. And you are responsible for hiring your general contractor, negotiating your lease. Now, they provide support, but you don't need to bring in your own professionals to make sure that you're not signing your life away, right? So if hire a franchise attorney, to me, that is like no better investment. Right? Because, I can help you with all sorts of things, but I'm not an attorney. But a franchise attorney who focuses on franchising day in and day out, they can look at the FDD of a brand and tell you probably in 20 minutes whether or not it's worth investing in. So that's what they get paid to do, and they do a very good job of it. And I know, I have a bunch of friends in the industry, that are franchise attorneys, and they, you pay them whatever you pay them. It's probably not enough, but they it's so worth it because they're gonna save you. I don't know if it's $1,000, $1,500, whatever it is. They're gonna save you
more money than what
$250,000 of development costs, right? Into a brand
they protect you from the mistakes.
They protect you from the mistakes
that you don't see.
Absolutely. And so
that's a great point.
They get paid the big bucks, but it's so worth it.
So I know you mentioned when you were talking about with franchising, there's a lot of systems that are behind you, and you're not really on your own. But let's say someone wanted to be on their own. So, what would you say is really the big difference of someone going the franchise route versus starting a startup?
So I think there's a lot to be said for both, right? There's pros and cons for both. So on the pros of an independent business, you call the shots, right? If you win, you get to take credit. If you fail, you got to take responsibility, right? It all falls on you. And so you get to celebrate, right? Because you've accomplished something and you have your name on it and it's shiny and your family's legacy and all those things. But you can have that same thing with a franchise. And the difference is you hit the ground running with a franchise. With an independent concept, you're wearing every single hat, right? So you're in charge of real estate, construction, marketing, market planning, like everything. You're also having to be the salesperson. You're also working the counter. You're doing all the things, right? And you get burnt out very quickly. So with a franchise system, you have you have just the support of your operations team. There's a construction manager, typically if there's brick and mortar involved, and then real estate, then training, right? So you get trained to operate the way that the system operates to be successful. So you think about it. If you go to a McDonald's in Miami and you go to a McDonald's in Seattle, tastes exactly the same, right? Because there are processes in place. This is how you make the burger, right? And so there are all these manuals that teach you everything, right? The pickle,
it's
precision, right? The pickle goes first. I don't know. I've never worked at a McDonald's, but there's a system for everything, even putting together a cheeseburger, right? And so when you go to Miami, you go to Seattle, it will taste exactly the same. Now it might not be, it's going to vary because when you bring in franchisees, there's room for error, right? But that's just with any system. And even with corporately owned stores, there's still, operator errors that happen all the time. But I just think, again, this is a way for us to get into a system, learn how a franchise system works. And now, you have this working capital and you can use some of this profit to start the concept that you wanted to start, right? Now you understand what the systems look like, what you're gonna need to support anyone that might want to buy into or invest in your business, right? So you can take that information. And so I wouldn't say you have to throw away that dream, but maybe it's a dream deferred, right? Just for a little while until you get into something. I always recommend getting into something smaller, right? So if you're new to franchising, new to business ownership, start small, right? Go with something that doesn't require a lot of you. So maybe it's a pet services company, right? Or maybe it's an ice cream shop or a cookie shop, something small, like not a huge menu that's really complex. And you get into it and you learn it and you learn it. And then you bring your family in and they learn it, right? So then as you're continuing to grow, they can grow with you and now you can scale.
Generational wealth at its finest. So, Ms. Carter, I know we talked about really getting into franchising. So let's say there's someone listening, they're very intrigued about starting a franchise. What does that process look like of acquiring, let's say a restaurant, for example? and then going about that process of attorney, operation, management, things of that nature. So how does really the process of getting a franchise really begin?
It starts way before you reach out to a brand, right? So that's where we come in. We want to make sure that we're helping to set you up for success. So you need to understand where you are and have real come to Jesus meetings with yourself, right? How much money do I really have to invest? What is my credit score? Do I need to clean up my credit history, right?
Yeah.
What is my net worth? A lot of people don't know what their net worth is. Basically, the simple way to figure it out is what you own minus what you owe. It's going to give you your net worth, right?
Yeah.
So you need to know what those numbers are, and you need to understand, like, what is it that you really want to do, right? We talked about it in your office. You said you talked about passion and just all the things, right? So what is it that you're really passionate about, right?
Yeah.
Because I believe in working from a positive.
That's
right?
That's right.
So
Absolutely.
I'm not going to try and be a doctor at this big age, right? I'm gonna go with what works for me, what I'm passionate about, what I love, what I enjoy, so that I can enjoy owning my business, right? And I don't dread waking up every day and going into whatever it is. So I would say just really having a good understanding of what you want to do, because you can talk to someone like me as a we call me a broker, but I do a lot more than what a broker does. But really understanding what you want to get into. Like, I've talked to people all the time, they're like, oh, I just don't know. So we narrow it down. What do you do? What do your kids like to do? Poll your friends, see what they're into. Where are they spending their money, right? You want to do something that you know is going to be beneficial and that where you're going to have a solid customer base.
Right.
So I think having those real conversations and then figuring out what does that time frame look like. Are you going to stay at your job? Are you going to try and work part-time? I don't believe in absentee ownership. I don't believe in it, right? I think if you want to be truly successful in anything, you go with plan A, right? There's no plan B. There's no, I got a wife and a girlfriend. Like, you got to pick one, right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe you do. I don't know. I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to judge.
MBA Unplugged does not condone any of that.
This is not a relationship advice.
It's not relationship advice. Okay, I digress. Y'all can cut that out. Y'all can cut that out.
But if you do have to choose, that's on you.
Yeah. But yeah, so you just have to narrow it down. Like, what do you truly want to do, and then go with it, right?
Yeah.
So what I do is I talk with everyone, and we narrow it down to 10, right? So we look at 10 different brands. We go through all of the data, right? How much does it cost? What are the average unit volumes, royalties, so on and so forth, development costs, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then whether or not the territory is available, because that's a huge component that people don't really think about. And so then we narrow it down to 3, and then we get to the one that they really want to go to, right? So there's a process, and then once we go through that, if someone chooses to work with me as a consultant, then by the time we reach the brand, you're ready, right? You've already talked to your lender. You already have some sort of a commitment in place. So once I then turn you over to whatever brand you're interested in, that then shortens the sales cycle for the salesperson at that brand. So it's a win-win for everybody, because now we're not wasting time. Like, because once you enter into the funnel of a brand, that salesperson has a short amount of time to really work with you, right? They want you to get to a decision pretty quickly because they have goals to meet, right? They have families, they have responsibilities, right? You know, everybody works to get paid, right? And so this whole thing really, you know, it's about efficiency. So if you know I'm not ready to do anything for another year, there's no sense in calling a brand and now the salesperson is chasing you for 9-10 months for you to eventually tell them no, right? So we just try to help on both sides of the equation.
So it really looks like before someone looks into getting into franchising, they need to have a very clear plan of, this is how much money I have, this is how far I'm looking out into the future. Like, you need to have a set amount of goals. This is not something you just get into just out of the blue. So
But I also like the part that you said, and I'm a firm believer of this. It's just how I've been trained. Even when I worked at Pepsi and Quaker, and when I remember at Pepsi, in my first week, now here I'm going to finance, making big money. I guess back then, at least I thought it was. But anyway, they say, okay, hey, don't even come to work. Go straight to the bottler. You're gonna be slinging cases for a week, for 2 weeks. That's like, that's the only way you know the business. Every consumer products company, even the restaurants, I learned everything: frying chicken, learn how to do the roles for Cinnabon, all that, because that's the only way I could come back and understand the numbers and what they really meant to me.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, and I remember when I was at AFC, they would bring people in and they would have that absentee kind of mentality. So I'm gonna have somebody else run it. And I was like, okay, this is not gonna work long term, but let's roll up our sleeves. I'll do what I can, but it's just, because you're not vested in it, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think, my heart kind of goes out to a lot of athletes who were allowed to purchase franchises, but weren't necessarily set up for success. So, they had this big checkbook and, they were stroking a check, and then the business just kind of fell through their hands.
That's right.
Because they just weren't prepared, right? They're still out on the field, on the court playing, and didn't really have, a lot of them didn't really have the infrastructure or the support to be as successful as they could be.
That's right.
If they were, if they had the right infrastructure. So, it's just a matter of making sure that you are prepared, because it's a business, right? And so there are a lot of legal ramifications, right? If you don't meet your requirements, if the brand doesn't meet their requirements, and if you don't know what that is, you're just aiming in the dark at that point, right? So you really need to understand what you're getting yourself into. It is a life-changing opportunity, and it could be a great thing if you're prepared. Yeah. But if you just walk in thinking everybody else is going to do the work and you're just going to clean the register, then you might as well just write a check out to Target Carter.
Yeah, I remember watching I guess maybe it might have been a podcast or something. They had Junior Bridgman on there.
Oh yeah.
And everyone knows had 150 Wendy's, and he talked about the first one he had, and he actually went into the restaurant and he flipped the burgers and everything. So it just resonated with me. Here's someone that planned it out, knew exactly what he wanted to do, but also understood that he needs to understand the business. Correct. And from that standpoint, I'm always, if you're gonna buy anything, you need to understand it.
Yeah. And there's a way to kind of have your feet in both worlds, right? Yeah. You can get someone to be your operating partner, right? But also attend training, and so that when you're ready to resign or retire, whatever the case is, you have something to walk into, right? And so the worst thing you want to do is just retire and then not have a plan. So if you work the plan, and then you get to the point where you're ready to make that decision, you then have something to actually work on and work towards as soon as that chapter closes. Yeah.
So, Ms. Carter, I am aware that you have your own firm in which you really help people start that process with franchising. Should you elaborate more on that? I know it's called the Franchise Player. If you want to tell the people a little bit more about the Franchise Player, really what you do every day.
Yeah, so the Franchise Player, we talk to folks all day long about their goals and aspirations to own a business. Sometimes it's just a business, sometimes it's a franchise. So I focus on franchising because that's really the space that I have the most knowledge in when it comes to small business. But there are other small businesses that I can assist with as well. So I work with folks who want to buy a franchise. Some just are looking for education at this point. So we have a 6-week program that's launching in January.
Good for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that's going to be great. And then we also work with individuals who have franchise concepts that they want to they have business models that they want to convert to a franchise concept.
Wow.
So we help them with that as well. On my consultancy side of the business, which is Guest First Services, that was my first consultancy. We work with all brands, people from all different backgrounds, right, to fill in the gaps wherever they may need. So I may get a client who is a startup, right? They're a newer brand and they need help with building their franchise sales and development team, or their process, right? They might need a CRM, or a system, a database that they can put all their information into. They may need me to follow up on leads that they've gotten. Whatever it is, we don't have a problem with filling in, but we want to just make sure that the brands know that we are there to support them. Right. So it's really a matter of the consultancy on the Guest First Services side is again, for pretty much everyone and everything. The Franchise Player was created because there is a need, right? Yeah. The information just has not been reaching our community. Right. And so this is a way to really bridge the gap so that it's a win-win for everybody.
So you like a Rich Paul, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
Big time.
Big time.
You just know everybody.
Yeah,
Right.
well, no, not everybody.
I saw you come in that Bentley, so I saw bags. Bags of
Rich
money.
Paul loaned that to me.
Oh,
Shout out Rich
Shout
Paul.
out to Rich Paul.
Shout out
There you
Rich
go.
Paul.
Absolutely.
There we go.
So I know. So you went to consulting firm, the franchise player.
Hmm.
If I'm starting out, do I go to the franchise player first to get the information, and then maybe go over to the consulting firm to really start funneling into the franchise process? Would that how that work?
No, so they're two separate companies
Right.
altogether. With the franchise player, we're really focused on taking the show on the road. So we started with the
Okay.
franchise game last month, the first ever African American franchise symposium and trade show in the country.
Wow.
So we launched that in Dallas or Plano, Texas last month.
Was it huge attendance?
Oh my God, it was. We wanted to keep it intimate
Yeah.
purposely.
Yeah.
Next year, so we had it on Friday, and we got the call on Monday. Like, are you guys coming back next year?
Uh-oh.
So it was so well attended. The people that were there for the right reasons. It
Yeah.
wasn't just about having people in seats, right?
Yeah.
It was about having folks who are ready to get deals done.
So next year is gonna be big.
Oh my gosh, next year is going to be amazing.
What's that big? What's the
InvestFest.
InvestFest?
No, there's another one that's in Austin. For the tech startups. What do they call that?
Afrotech?
Oh no, it's not Russell Brunson's thing, is it?
No, I can't remember the name, but it's big. It's
So
like
apparently
huge.
our memory's not working.
That's okay. Yeah, I mean we didn't take our Prevagen, but yeah, so you're gonna be like huge.
I don't know. I don't want to be huge.
I'm putting
Why?
it out there.
Why?
Yes, you do.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't want to be
Because you
huge.
want to invite us.
I want to be impactful.
Right.
We're gonna do our
We're gonna do it
podcast.
on the
That's your-
stage.
that's-
Well, you all are definitely invited.
On the
Please
stage.
bring it to the stage.
Y'all hear us?
Listen, y'all
We'll see
hear
y'all
me?
in Dallas, Texas.
Got a
next year.
commitment.
There's a commitment.
Got a commitment.
Paperwork.
There
we
we
need
go.
an attorney.
We'll see y'all in Dallas.
But we don't want to be.
Nah.
You know, there are some conferences that are just huge, and it's a different audience. Not to say that they're not welcome, but we want to make sure that we're
Yeah.
putting folks in the room that can connect with one another and get deals done in the next 3 to 6 months, right?
Yep.
Because it's an investment. When
It is
brands
an
come and they exhibit, they're paying to be there,
Yeah.
right?
Sounds like a career fair.
Well, there's a trade show, yeah. So
Yeah.
the brands came. We had Smoothie King, and we had Fuddruckers, Pet and Mind, IHG Hotels, American Franchise Academy. Shout out to Aisha Pascaro. Shout out to Brian Woods at Neighborly.
Hey.
See, this is what we do. We promote. That's all we do at
That's what
Morehouse
we
College.
But I mean, so they had their, we had the vendor area where they had their booth set up. And then, and they paid to be there. They got to meet folks who are ready to make
And this
deals
is your
happen.
deal. You came up with this.
I came up with this
Look
idea.
at Miss
But
Carter.
isn't it amazing when you have a purpose, all these things just pop in your head
Start
that
flying.
you want to do?
Man, let me tell you. So
No
you're onto
limitation.
something.
No limitation. There's no limits.
No
That's why
limits.
it's going to be big.
So I've had this vision for over 10 years.
Wow.
And every brand I've worked for, I'm kind of like, we need to do this, we need to do that. And it just
So
wasn't
you
a
used to fight.
priority.
So you used to fight that battle internally. I saw the eyes go.
Yeah.
You saw the eyes go.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it cute.
Yeah.
Trying to keep it cute.
We're going to be political here. We don't want to get shut down after 2
No.
episodes.
Right. So I've had this vision for over 10 years, and everywhere I've gone, I get these thoughts, these just ideas of what I want to do and who I want to be on the stage.
Absolutely.
And all the things.
Yep.
So I have a client, which is where the event was held. And I don't know if I can use her name, so I'm just not going to say it. But I have a client, and I was telling my contact there about this vision. And she goes, well, why don't you have it here? Now, mind you, I just started this company in January.
Yeah.
We had this conversation in June.
Wow.
Right.
3 months?
3 months. In 3 months, we put that conference together. And that's what happens when opportunity meets preparation.
That's right.
Yeah,
Had I not been prepared,
Always prepared.
right? When she said, let's go, as soon as she said, let's go, and we
You
found
were
the date,
That's right.
I put together my team.
You were ready.
We were ready.
Plan was already done.
We were ready. And so I have two partners that are absolutely amazing. And we flew to Dallas. One of them lives in Dallas. We met with them, and then we took a picture and just got started, right? It was amazing.
You had some amazing brands there.
That is.
I mean, they weren't like just.
But let me tell you, it's from relationships. So IHG Hotels, a good friend of mine, I met him when I moved to Atlanta 20 years ago.
Wow.
I was in the hotel industry.
Wow.
And he and I were really good friends. Like I remember he didn't have a car, and I would have to pick him up to take him to work sometimes. Now he's like a VP at IHG, like doing amazing things. So when he learned what I was doing, it was a no-brainer.
For sure.
Yeah.
Smoothie King, another brand. My old boss is the VP of franchise development there. He found out what I was doing. And he's like, how can I help? So it's a matter. And back to the conference. Everybody that was on the stage, I had been collecting people over the past 15 years. So when I reached out to them, they're like, well, what do you need me to do?
Look at that right there.
They were there.
That's a blessing.
With no question. And my keynote got sick the day before.
Oh, no.
And so Damon Dunn, who I mentioned earlier, was supposed to moderate the next panel after the keynote. And I told him, I said, listen, the keynote got sick. He said, well, what do you need me to do?
He just slid in, huh?
I said, I need you to do what you do, because he's just very well spoken. He's run for office before. He's that guy.
Okay.
So he walks in that morning and he says, okay, he says, here's what we're gonna do. He already had the game plan. He said, read my bio, play this video, and then hand me the mic. That was it.
Shut it down.
That was it. And he blew everybody away. It was amazing.
Shout out Mr. Damon Dunn.
Shout out to Damon
Shout out
Dunn.
Mr. Damon Dunn.
Big heart.
Shout out.
But my key takeaway from this is, and I feel your energy, and this what I call, I'm big on EQ, emotional intelligence. I feel all of that from you. So, okay. But the big thing I do here. And I tell my students this all the time: social capital is important.
Absolutely.
Network.
Absolutely.
It's important. And if you don't maintain it correctly, it can literally destroy you too at the same time.
Oh yeah.
So when you tell people you're going to be somewhere,
be there.
If you tell someone you're going to call. If you whatever you do, your word. And I always tell my students, give more than you take. Because when you need that trump card, my bad. I'm so sorry. Please don't kill me. But when you need that faith, that's better.
There we go.
You can get it.
Yeah.
And then people say, hey,
Yeah.
and you're a good person too, and they know that all comes together.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. I
That's a
appreciate
beautiful
that,
thing.
because
Absolutely.
this is all about relationships.
Of course.
I talked about the people piece earlier, right? Damon didn't have the people piece in his business plan. And okay, that was important to get that deal done, but just in life, right? You have to treat people with kindness.
Yep.
You don't have to be nice all the time, but be kind, right?
Right.
It doesn't hurt to be kind.
Yeah.
And so if you're kind to people, people remember how you've treated them and how you made them feel.
I think that's the only thing,
That's
they remember.
Yeah.
Right? You could have bought them a Christmas card or whatever. Like they don't.
Yeah.
People buy gifts all the time,
Right.
right? But how you make somebody feel,
Heartfelt.
that really goes a long way.
Resonates.
And so, to your point, thank you for picking up on that. Like, it's just, to me, I want to make sure that, people see the God in me. Because what I do, I know this is not something I would have chosen for myself.
Yeah.
I know, like I mentioned at the top of the podcast, I know that this was God-given and purpose-driven. Like, this is absolutely what I was meant to do.
You want to know my dream? In 1988, when I left the chapel, I said I wanted to make a lot of money, get a BMW, go back to Chicago, blah blah blah. And if someone had told me I was going to be teaching here in the year 2023,
Right.
I'd have told them, I don't know what you on, but I ain't doing that. That ain't happening. So
Right.
you never know your calling, what you're being drawn to.
Yeah.
And the thing I'm receiving today is that for you, it just seems natural.
Yeah.
Like you own it, like you know your stuff.
Yeah.
Which I know you're going to show my students today. So I'm glad I reached out, because I said I was following you for a while. I said, who's this woman? And I said, you know how people on LinkedIn, and they start looking at your background. He said, why are they looking at my background? I was like, wow, she's really doing some powerful things.
Thank you.
And I know franchising has always been like that. It's almost like a gatekeeper. Like, how do I get in? How do I get up to the 9th floor?
One of America's best kept secrets.
I want to fry some chicken. How do I do that? And I was like, I hook you up with somebody. And I do remember this. Share this story. I got interested in business because of my dad, indirectly, and I always tell them the story and listen to me like, really, I didn't realize I was doing this. You remember when Jesse Jackson in Chicago had Operation Breadbasket,
Oh, okay.
and that's before it became Operation Push.
Okay.
And he always talked about economic survival and empowerment in the black community, the franchise to do those things. And I said, Dad, what does he mean by franchise? Oh, I mean, on the McDonald's. I said, what does that mean? Father drove me to a McDonald's and said, this is on the south side of Chicago. More than likely a black person owns this. Look at the employees in there.
Yeah.
I was like 8 or 9 at that time. So my dad planted that seed,
That exposure.
Good for
that
you.
exposure early
Yeah.
on. So I always knew, said, okay, it might not be a franchise, but it'll be business. And see,
Something along those lines.
and when I was coming through college, the only thing I had in terms of a playbook was Black Enterprise.
Mhm.
I waited for Black. You know what I'm talking. I waited
Shout
for
out to Black Enterprise.
Shout out to
New
Black
school doesn't know
Enterprise.
who that is.
I waited
I'm
for
with you.
Black Enterprise. I waited for Black Enterprise every month, and then they come out with the top 500, top 1,000. A lot of those guys own franchises.
Yeah. Well, where I grew up, I would go to McDonald's all the time with my dad, and my dad was smart. He didn't know about franchising because I know he would have shared that information with me, and I never knew that. You know, I grew up in the inner city of Boston. It was Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan. That's where we grew up, and you know, hopefully you can climb your way out and create some success for
Is that
yourself.
New
And a lot of
Edition?
people,
New
yeah, New Edition. Shout out to
We
Boston.
just-
Wait, you're from where New Edition's from?
Yes.
That's awesome.
We just giving mad shout outs.
Listen.
Shout out New Edition.
My favorite group ever. But my dad, you know, he was a smart guy, never mentioned franchising to me. And I mean, for me to not know about it and my family to not know about it, and when I got into this space, I said, there has to be a way to get this information out there. Because when you look at every level within the franchising space, every level, there's a lack of diversity.
That's right.
Right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Unless you're in accounting, unless you're working at the store level, right? Or you're the customer. There's really no other place where you see a lot of us, right?
Yep.
So I just said, you know what, I'm tired of spending my energy trying to explain what the business benefit is of diversity, right? I'm tired of that. I'm not going to spend my energy doing that anymore. I'm going to take my energy and I'm going to use it in a positive way and give it to those who will greatly receive it. And selfishly, I didn't want to use my customer service voice anymore, and I didn't want to wake up to an alarm clock. And I've been able to achieve both of those things. So
That's awesome.
here we are.
That's awesome. So, not to get too into the future, but what are some of your future visions look like really relating to the thing in Dallas, the symposium, maybe future things? I know you said you have a course coming out for the franchise player. What does the future look like for you?
So lots to come.
Okay.
So from the franchise game, we now have 2 other platforms. The smaller version of the franchise game, which is tailored to specific brands and corporations that want to have education brought to their establishments or their associations. That's called our scrimmage.
Yeah.
And then we have the huddle, which is where I personally come out and talk to basically HBCUs, Black churches, Divine Nine, you name it, you know, wherever our people live, work, play, and worship is where I want to be.
Great strategy.
To
Great
just
strategy.
really share this information. So we have that, and then the franchise game 2024 will be in Plano, Texas again next year.
Okay.
We
Awesome.
are going to exhibit at Super Bowl. In
Shout out to NFL, Roger
Shout out.
Goodell.
Here we go.
I don't know
So-
about shout out. I'm thinking about some tickets.
So we are in the process of finalizing.
I'm not laughing.
Person Young wants us to
I want
Well,
tickets.
well, I don't know if I have tickets to the game, but we're gonna have access
You
to
have
the
party?
players. So the Player Network Association.
You know what? That's okay.
That's all we need.
That's all we need.
Yes. So,
Jalen
you know,
Hurts, we will see you.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts and everyone else. So really exciting stuff.
That's awesome.
Since the franchise game, there's been a lot of opportunity for us to get into spaces where, you know, it's just it makes sense for us to be, and so we're bringing brands with us. So I do have a brand partner that will probably be exhibiting with me as a sponsor for me being there, which is great, and lot of great things coming out of this. So
I have great. I feel real good about you.
thank you.
Because I think you are hitting on. I always when I was on the other side, and I always think, God, there needs to be somebody representing athletes, making sure they're getting treated properly, they're getting the right information, right training. and the agent plays their role. They get the contract done, but I think there's an opportunity for you to partner with these agents and say, hey, I can help your athletes really prepare for when that day comes where they're not able to play anymore. I can help show them opportunities.
Yeah, and I think
and that's a process of doing that, and
absolutely,
to close that gap.
Absolutely, and I feel bad for the athletes. They get a bad rap because again they weren't set up for success.
That's right.
So
yeah.
A lot of brands don't really want to get into business with them because they don't think they're going to take it seriously. Yeah. And so, not to say that I'm like the Olivia Pope of franchising, which I don't know. I'm not.
Rich
but
Paul.
I'm a Rich Paul of franchising. Shout out to Rich. But I just think if they had the right information and some support around what they were trying to do, that things could have panned out differently, right? So so my goal is to, if I can just touch and help, one person at a time, one athlete at a time, whatever we can do to help. That's really what our goal is.
That's great stuff.
That's awesome. So Ms. Carter, as we begin to wrap out, if there was one thing that you could leave the audience with about really the power and the importance of franchising, what would you say it would be?
I just believe that franchising is the greatest. Well, not the greatest. Let me take that back. I think it's probably the most efficient way to start to create generational wealth.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Get into a system where you can hit the ground running. You can bring your family into the fold. You can grow from there. Bring your friends in. Right? I've worked with groups from all different backgrounds, and what I've noticed is that they pool their resources. Right? They might buy one at first. And they work it, everybody works, it gets to understand what it is, and then they branch off, right? They might branch off and buy individual units, or they might branch off and form different partnerships, but there's a collection of folks pooling their resources, their information, their background, to make those investments. And we just have to learn to start trusting one another. And some people will say, well, I don't want to get in a partnership, I don't want to be in business with anyone else. Can't really trust people. Well, you have to be trustworthy first, right? So make sure you're trustworthy, and make sure you're partnering with people that you trust, right? So you can't get into business with everybody. But I'm sure we all know at least one or two people, whether it's a sibling, a parent, a grandparent, that might be interested and might be in a position to lend their resources to help get approved for a concept, right? Start small, start simple. And I think, again, hit the ground running with something that you can rest assured that you're going to have support behind you, so that you are set up for success and not failure.
So, for all the people who are looking to get into contact with you, where can they find you on all social media platforms? Oh my gosh! So, on LinkedIn, The Franchise Player. On Instagram, I Am The Franchise Player, and on the website, thefranchiseplayer.com. I'll put all that in the description. But Ms. Carter, we are so thankful for your time and your knowledge. Professor Young, as always, thank you guys, and we will see you on the next one. Peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.